And this is the number one mistake that I see presenters making. Almost everybody makes it. Now, I see so many presentations out there that could be improved by following some simple, tried, tested, and true tactics. So I'm going to share those tactics with you, and I promise you they will help level up your presentation skills. The first tactic is to start in analog. Now, I used to make the mistake of jumping right into PowerPoint when I wanted to create a presentation. I'm sure a lot of people do this. This is a mistake because it puts you in the mindset of how are my slides going to look versus what is the story I'm going to tell. Your first step is really to build that story, and starting with design, starting in PowerPoint is going to impede your ability to create that story. Don't worry about the design, you'll worry about that after. So what does starting in analog look like? It looks like Post-it notes, taking Post-it notes and putting them on your desk, writing out the high-level point for each slide that you want to communicate on that slide, and looking at the story that you are telling over all of those Post-it notes. You can do this in digital form as well, using Figma or your favorite design creation app. Just make sure you're not doing any design. You're really just putting in your high-level points. I'm going to show a graph on this slide. The next thing you want to make sure that you're doing is creating a story. Your deck, your presentation is a story. I don't care if it's a keynote to 1,000 people or it's a mundane internal deck about how to improve some process for hiring. You are always trying to compel, to galvanize, to influence those on the other side, on the receiving end of your presentation. And the best way to do that is to tell stories. Since childhood, we are conditioned to love stories. When we were children, we loved bedtime stories. Now we love Star Wars and Game of Thrones and all that. So stories work in life and in business. And so think about a story arc, and there are attributes of all these great stories, again, like Star Wars, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, that can be imported into our business storytelling. So a framework for how this story arc looks is something like this. The world used to look like this. It had all of these attributes, and that worked at a time, but now we're in this new world. And here's some examples of this new world. And this creates a problem, again, with examples. Here's the solution to your problem in the new world. This is the hero, and this is the product or the outcome that you want, or the action that you want your audience to take. And you should have a call to action at the end as well. Now, another way to think about this is hero versus villain, right? All great stories have hero versus villain, Batman versus Joker, etc. Darth Vader versus Luke Skywalker. So introduce the villain first, and this could be the old way of doing things, the old world, the competitor's approach, the competitor's products, and then the hero. The hero is your solution, your audience, your proposal. And again, use examples. Some of the best presentations we've seen out there are the Apple presentations, the Apple campaigns, whether it's Steve Jobs or some of the commercials they've done. Think about 1984 commercial they did, which positioned IBM as the legacy way of doing things, the villain, and Apple as the hero. The Mac versus PC ads in the 90s, where Mac was the hero, PC was the villain, the old way of doing things. Or Steve Jobs' keynotes for the iPhone presentation. He positioned smartphones and BlackBerries with their plastic keyboards that were hard to type on and their small screens as the legacy products. Those were the villains, and then the iPhone was the hero. Finally, inject stories to illustrate a point. So within your story, you're going to want to have stories. Steve Jobs tells the whole story of Apple releasing revolutionary devices from the Mac to all the way to the iPod when he was presenting the iPhone keynote. So even start your presentation with a story if you can. And if you don't have stories of your own, myself, I often don't have stories of my own. I find other people's stories and I use those. I even keep a list, or I try to, of stories that I've found out in the wild, whether it's reading a book, on a blog post, whatever it is. Keep a list of those stories. Use stories. Next tactic, and this is the number one mistake that I see presenters making. Almost everybody makes it, and that is no bullet points ever. Slides are not a script for you to use as a crutch. You shouldn't be reading your slides. Slides are supposed to be complementary to the story you're telling, to your point. They should work together. If they have too much text, if a slide has too much text, your audience cannot read the slide and listen to you at the same time. It's cognitive overload. And this is what I see a lot of presenters doing. Now, we've all seen people in a presentation pull up a slide and say, hey, I know there's a lot going on this slide, but here's the takeaway. This is the worst thing you can do. Just put the takeaway on the slide, or just put the supporting graph on the slide. Don't have everything that you want to say on the slide. So strip away everything, break it into multiple slides if you have to. I'd rather have 3 slides, simple slides, than one slide where we're trying to jam everything in. Some of my favorite slides are the ones with just one big image. I'm struck by the MacBook Air presentation that Steve Jobs did, where he literally had an envelope on the slide to illustrate the thinness of the MacBook Air. No text, just a picture. And so we say no bullets. I mean no bullet point sentences. It's okay to have a headline or have 3 headlines on the points that you want to make, but think about creating space in these slides, and bullet points do the opposite of that. So I like to say the slide is done when there's nothing left to take away, not when there's nothing left to add. I've seen people say, hey, there's still space on this slide. We could jam this thing in. We could put it in this little area in the bottom left. Don't do that. You want to have spacious slides. You want them to feel airy and light, because then the audience won't feel overwhelmed. Next point, the rule of 3. Now, I don't know why this works, but humans love to receive information in 3s. Think of Steve Jobs' iPhone presentation. He described the iPhone as a phone, as an internet connectivity device, and as a music player. 3 things. And you'll see this over and over again in his presentations, in Barack Obama's presentations, in a lot of great orators' presentations. They're doing this intentionally. So if you can break things into 3, here's the 3 things I'm going to talk about. Here's the 3 reasons why this works. Anytime you can use that rule of 3, use it. It's effective. Next point, use a designer. Unless you're a professional designer, your design is going to suck. And design is important. It helps create that feeling amongst the audience. And so you want to be commensurate with the stakes of the presentation here. Obviously, if it's a 30-minute deck that you're presenting internally, not as critical to have stellar design. I've seen presentations for huge enterprise customers where no designer is involved at all. And that's just lunacy. So if it's a really important presentation, a keynote with a sales presentation for a big customer, make sure you have a design partner for it. Do your story, do your outline, and send it to the designer and work with them from there. Next, you should never be surprised by the next slide. I always see presenters who go to the next slide and they seem surprised. They're like, oh yeah, this is what this slide is about. No, don't do that. You need to be ready for the next slide. Again, commensurate with the stakes. So you're going to prepare a lot for a big presentation, a smaller presentation. You should know what's coming next, but obviously a little bit less preparation on that. Finally, use metaphors and focus on benefits. A great example of this is the iPod tagline, 1,000 songs in your pocket. Steve Jobs didn't say the iPod's got this amount of hard drive space or it's got this processor. Maybe he did, but the thing that you remembered was that he said 1,000 songs in your pocket. It creates a visual of what the benefit is for the solution. So use metaphors, use analogies, focus on benefits. Now, one of the great resources that helped me level up my presentation game was a book called The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs. And it does a great job of dissecting all of Steve's great presentations and the tactics that he used over and over again to compel audiences and create remarkable presentations. So if you can implement even 2 or 3 of these tactics that I've listed here, you're going to communicate better. You're going to expand your influence through your presentations. And it's really one of the most important skills that you can have to grow your career, is to be able to compel people and persuade through presentations. Implement these tactics, and I promise you're going to level up your presentations. See y'all next time.